My name is Martin Emerson, and I'm a volunteer for Diabetes UK. I also live with type 2 diabetes myself. And I say optimistically because in the time available, it's a very large subject to cover. So I'll be happy to answer any questions I can during and at the end of the presentation, but please do bear in mind, I'm neither an expert nor am I a doctor. So I won't be able to go into anything in fine detail, nor to discuss any individual medical issues. But if I can't provide the answer, I hope I'll be able to point you towards other sources that you may find useful. So today I'll be talking about what diabetes is and what impact it has on everyday lives individually and nationally. I'll talk also about Diabetes UK and what we do. Now, before I go on to that, please make sure that you've got the availability to answer these questions, because we're going to do a little simple true and false quiz, just to see what you know now or think you know about diabetes. So just jump in whenever you want to. So the first question, or the first statement, true or false? Thirst is a symptom of diabetes. It is. It's one of several, but it's certainly one that's worth looking out for. Okay, second statement, type 2 diabetes is a mild form of the disease. True or false? All types of diabetes are serious and need to be treated seriously. So, statement 3, people living with diabetes can't have sugar. It's false. People living with diabetes can have sugar, but they need to account for it, how much they're having, and they may need to adjust any medication that they're taking because of it. Or the pancreas is the organ in the body where insulin is made.
True.
Yep, it's true. It's true. Statement 5, there are more than 2 types of diabetes. It's certainly more than 2. I've recently read an article which says there are probably up to 13. So, statement 6, people with diabetes should eat specially made diabetic alternatives. Diabetic alternatives may well have the sugar removed, but then the chances are they put lots of other stuff in them, including a lot of fat. The way that they're made can also cause an upset stomach, and they're often a lot more expensive anyway, so there's no need to go that way. Okay, statement number 7, people with diabetes shouldn't play sport. It is false. People living with diabetes need to be aware of their blood sugar levels when they're exercising, and they may need to adjust any medication and food intake that they're on, but playing sport, in fact, can be highly beneficial because exercise can help lower your blood sugar levels. Mm-hmm. So looking at blood sugar in that case, statement 8, people with diabetes can't eat fruit. Again, it's false. So there are natural sugars in fruit. In fact, the body deals with the natural sugars generally quicker than anything that isn't a natural sugar. But again, if you're living with diabetes, you just need to be aware and maybe adjust medication. But in general, fresh food altogether is always going to be the best alternative. So, statement 9, type 2 diabetes only affects people who are overweight. It's false. It's something that can increase your risk of type 2. But in fact, if you're carrying excess weight, where you carry it is actually often more important. There is evidence now that if you have a large amount of fat around some of your internal organs, that can be something that makes you more susceptible to developing diabetes. Waist size is a very good indicator, but ethnicity, age, family history, they all play a large part in someone's risk of developing type 2. And it's possible for someone who is a perfectly healthy weight to develop type 2 because of other factors. So you need to be aware of that. And Number 10, nice and easy. Type 1 diabetes is treated with insulin. It's true. If it can't be produced naturally through the pancreas, then sometimes you have to introduce it through injection and other ways. So, what is diabetes? Well, to put it simply, diabetes is a condition where the amount of glucose, which is essentially a type of sugar, in the blood is too high because the body can't use it properly. The organ called the pancreas produces the insulin to regulate the body's use of that glucose. So in people with diabetes, either the pancreas doesn't produce enough insulin, or the insulin it does produce doesn't work properly. The two most prevalent types of diabetes are type 1 and type 2. About 90% of people with diabetes will have type 2. About 8% will have type 1. And about 2% are the rarer conditions. So whatever the type, diabetes is serious. And the significance of the condition is growing, and it's predicted to do so. There's currently over 5 million people living with diabetes in the UK. You put that in context, more than 1 in 15 of the population. So every time you see 15 people, at least one of them, statistically, will be living with diabetes in one form or another. The shocking thing is that it may be that there are as many as 12.3 million people are currently at risk of developing type 2 diabetes, which is frankly an astonishing figure. And one that's going to impact future planning and use of the NHS more than ever. The latest estimates say that diabetes now, and when I say diabetes now, I'm talking about the complications generally of living with diabetes, but diabetes now is costing UK health services, so essentially the NHS, 10.7 billion every year. The causes of type 1 diabetes are still mostly unknown. It could be as a result of a virus or other infection, but what is clear is that there is a genetic link. If both your parents have type 1, you've got a 30% chance of developing it yourself. If you have an identical twin with type 1, that chance can rise to 70%. It's more common under the age of 40 and is treated by taking insulin through a pump or by injections together with regulating diet and exercise. Type 2, the risk factors, similarly family history, generally being over 40, being overweight, and the higher waist circumference, which I mentioned earlier. Now, to put that in real numbers and using old technology, over 37-inch waist in a Caucasian man, or 31.5 inches in a woman. In fact, it's less than that in other ethnic groups. And ethnicity with the age risk factor falling below 40 in people in Black or South Asian origin means that, unfortunately, it is a fact that people living in that ethnic group or those ethnic groups are at higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes just because that's where they fall in the groups. Recent evidence shows that the number of people in the population in general under 40 with the condition has risen nearly 40% since 2016, 2017. And financial deprivation, unfortunately, along with the ethnicity, puts you at a greater risk. Depression, severe mental illness, they play a part as well. Treatment ranges from the adjustments to your diet, physical activity, to additional medications. Some of you may have heard of the drug metformin. It's what's called the gold standard as far as diabetes treatment is concerned, but that could include insulin too and other drugs along the way. So there are several common symptoms of diabetes, whatever the type. One that it becomes more obvious as you start to look at people and how they are operating, is that they're generally more tired than usual. We said about being thirsty, but that, strangely, being thirsty is also coupled with needing to go to the toilet a lot, especially at night. In some instances, the diabetes can affect your circulation, which means that cuts and wounds can take longer to heal. Blurred eyesight is one of the indicators. And going back to the circulation, in particular, loss of feeling in the toes and the feet generally. Strangely, I have an appointment with my podiatrist once every quarter. And she was saying to me that she'd just been on a course where it's now been discovered that lots of people have little hairs on their toes. If those hairs on your toes suddenly aren't there anymore, the chances are you're losing circulation in your feet. Simple thing, but it's one that's worth being aware of. Another potential risk factor is losing weight without trying to. And one of the more unpleasant side effects is regular bouts of thrush or genital itching. Now, these symptoms occur because some or all of the glucose stays in the blood, isn't being used for fuel as energy. The body tries to reduce the blood glucose levels by flushing the excess out of the body in the urine. And these higher glucose levels in the urine are just perfect conditions for fungal infections such as thrush. But not everyone gets the symptoms. About 60% of people, and here I'm going to put myself in that state, I have no symptoms at all when they're diagnosed with type 2. My personal experience was that I was in blissful ignorance until I had a medical for an insurance company in association with work. It was all going very well, and then the nurse said, well, I think you should arrange to see your doctor. And I had my first blood test for diabetes, and there we were. So with hindsight, I was in what you might call sweet spot as far as the demographics go, because I was just into my 40s. I was overweight. I was probably underactive, although I had been very active, but I was less so then. I've lived with diabetes for over 20 years now, and I would say probably for the first 15 of those, I still didn't have any particular indication that I had anything going on. Things have started to change a bit now, but they can be missed. So it can be quite difficult to know. So how is diabetes diagnosed? Well, the blood test. I mean, back in the day, there are times when people will tell you that things now are far worse than they were back in the day. If you were a doctor back in this 17th, 18th, 19th century, the only way you could tell if somebody had diabetes, if they weren't showing any other risk symptoms, was you had the unenviable job of smelling or tasting their urine. Yeah. Because the urine would have a sugary sweetness in it. Mm. So fortunately for a doctor today, that's not part of the job. I made the point earlier that diabetes is serious. As well as being a statement of fact, those are words used by Diabetes UK as a simple to remember phrase to raise awareness of the condition, particularly in Parliament and with other decision makers. But what does serious mean? Well, on an individual level, and if diabetes is not taken seriously and steps taken to avoid the complications, people living with diabetes risk developing retinopathy, which is an eye disease which affects your eyesight in the long term and can lead to full blindness. Cardiovascular disease, including heart attack or stroke. I made the mistake just recently of doing one of these online thingies, just out of interest to see what my risk factor was. And the jolly news is that I'm 25% more likely to have a heart attack or stroke than anybody who doesn't have diabetes, because of my age, because of my height, weight, all the rest of it. It's just a fact of living with diabetes. Nephropathy, which for those who don't know is kidney disease. Neuropathy, nerve disease, which, as I said, can affect the circulation, particularly in the feet. And if it goes too far, can lead to lower leg, feet, amputations. Sexual dysfunction, it can cause depression, poor mental health, and with gestational diabetes, but also just going through pregnancy with diabetes can bring a whole host of problems. So, like I said, it's serious. Again, I'm going to bore you with a personal anecdote. At the beginning of this year, I had my annual eye checkup, where it was discovered that I had a form of macular edema, which had been brought on by diabetes. I wouldn't say I was totally unaware, but I wasn't aware that it had gone as far as it had. And the joy of that is now I'm having injections in my eyes. Fortunately, it's had the effect that it should have, and things seem to have stabilized. Had it not been caught, I could well have been on the road to losing my eyesight. So it starts to come home to you how serious it is when those sorts of things happen. So let's have a look at a couple of the issues that can arise. You may have heard of both of these. It's hypos and hypers. A hypo, or hypoglycemia, to give it its full title, occurs when the blood glucose or the sugar level falls too low. It can happen very quickly, with symptoms including sweating, headache, heart palpitations, heart racing, lips tingling, blurred sight. And unfortunately, there's no quick answer as to why they happen, but some things make them more likely, such as missing a meal, having one without enough carbohydrates, carbs, exercising without adjusting insulin, however well, how good it may be for you. If you don't check up along the way, you can end up having a hypo. You can take more insulin than you should have done, or you can drink alcohol on an empty stomach. It's one of the strange things that I remember one of my first appointments that I had with a diabetic nurse, and she said about drinking alcohol, and I facetiously said, well, why don't I just drink alcohol then? That brings your blood sugar level down. And it does, but it brings it down so fast that you can keel over with it very quickly. So you have to be aware of the things that can happen. So a hyper, as against a hypo, is hyperglycemia. So that is a situation when the blood level is too high. So the symptoms of that are very similar to the symptoms that you can have with generally getting diabetes themselves, with a few others. So tiredness, headache, thirsty, passing urine more often than usual. It may result from missing medication, eating too many carbs, being stressed, being unwell from an infection, or having overcompensated because you were having a hypo. So you may have spotted from all that living with diabetes can be quite difficult, because if you eat too much, you have problems. If you eat too little, you have problems. Your medication can keep things in balance until it doesn't. If you have flu, COVID, it's unpleasant for most people. With diabetes, it can very quickly become life-threatening. So a few statistics just to show what this means in the UK. Since 1998, going back a while, the number of people diagnosed with diabetes has more than doubled. And by 2030, it's estimated that nearly 6 million people will have diabetes in the UK. So to put that in perspective, currently, the NHS spends more than 10% of its entire budget each year on diabetes. That's current. So whether there will be enough money in the kitty to fund the necessary treatment of diabetes is debatable, particularly in current circumstances where the budget generally is about to become a big topic. Raising the awareness of the issues surrounding diabetes is important individually, but it's also important nationally. So early diagnosis, good control of blood glucose levels can reduce the risk of complications, with all the implications that has for society as a whole. It's not overstating it to say that diabetes is the UK's biggest and fastest growing problem that we have in the health system. So Diabetes UK has a vision of a world where diabetes can do no harm. Not that it won't be there, but that the treatment of it means that everybody can live with the condition without it radically affecting everything that they do. So Diabetes UK is trying to prevent type 2. It's campaigning for and supporting everyone affected by diabetes. And it's funding research that one day will lead us to a cure. There are a couple of examples of that. At the moment, there's an artificial pancreas being developed, or has been developed, and it's starting to be rolled out, which delivers the right amount of insulin at the right time, particularly for people with type 1 diabetes. You may also have seen that it's possible for a proportion of people recently diagnosed with the development of type 2 to put that into remission with lifestyle changes alone. And I emphasize recently, because as I say, I was diagnosed with diabetes over 20 years ago. That ship has sailed as far as I'm concerned. 20 years ago, this wasn't known. Essentially, somewhere within 4 to 6 years of diagnosis, it is possible to put the disease into remission. At the moment, the implication is that it's not gone, but it's still there, but it can be put into remission with some fairly drastic changes to lifestyle, basically a reboot of your system. So part of my function is to liaise with my local MP to put diabetes as close to the top of the political agenda as possible. Diabetes UK supports and advises anyone affected by diabetes through various channels, such as a helpline, an online forum, and local support groups. We try to reach people in those communities at the higher risk of type 2, which, as I say, has an ethnic part to it. We also try to inform healthcare professionals on the best practice and latest treatments, and to work with and within the NHS to prevent or delay type 2. So that's a very brief run through. If you'd like more information, you might be interested in joining Diabetes UK to help in any of the work that we do, please let me know.